19th, 2021. I'd like to do a quick roll call. I'm Maureen Holt, the chair. Is Paul Gator, vice chair, present?
Present.
Hal Bogner, committee member?
Present.
Steve Maller, committee member?
Present.
Claudia Marshall, committee member? I think she's not present right now. Phil Marshall, committee member, also not present.
I'm present.
Phil's here.
Hi, sorry, I missed you there.
No
Phil Marshall, committee member.
Present.
And Michael Settles, committee member.
Present.
Thank you, everyone, for being here again tonight. If we have members of the public who haven't been to any of our meetings yet, I'd just like to quickly review why we're here tonight as the Redistricting Advisory Committee. So we are here as a group because Half Moon Bay must redraw its district boundaries, and we need to use the new 2020 census data. And this process is called redistricting. So all cities with the district-based election system like we have must redistrict after each census. This keeps population counts within each district relatively equal, ensuring equal representation amongst each of the districts in our city. Half Moon Bay adopted these district boundaries that we currently have in 2018, but they were using old census data from 2010. And so our job is to reevaluate using the new census data. The main focus of tonight's meeting is the question of which district model is preferred. Do we want 4 districts with a 2 or a 4-year mayor, or 5 districts with a rotating mayor? Ultimately, the charge of this committee is to send 2 maps to the City Council for approval, one with 5 districts, one with 4 districts, and also to give input from the committee and the public on which district model is preferred. So that's the charge of this group tonight. And for the public, I would urge you to go to the Half Moon Bay City website with the under redistricting, and there's a lot of background information that can catch you up to our process and show you our timeline for the next year. For now, I'd like to turn things over to Shalise Tilton from NDC.
There we go. I think I double clicked on my mute. Thank you, Chair Holt. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is everyone able to see the PowerPoint? Okay. So as the chair mentioned, the purpose of tonight's focus is to focus on the model. The current model creates 4 districts, has 4 districts with an elected mayor, and that mayor is a 4-year term. It's important to know that that mayor was slated to start in November of 2022. So we actually do not have a directly elected mayor at this time. Instead, it's a rotating mayor, which is probably the most common model in California. I don't know if you had a chance to see the commission's logo, think inside the lines. And we thought that was a clever part on clever catch line on part of the commission, because we do want you to focus inside the lines and those communities that will be included within single districts. But as Chair Holt said tonight, we're focusing on the model. Should we keep the existing, is it preferable to keep the existing model with 4 districts and an elected mayor, or whether the model should be, another model should be used? So other options include going back to 5 districts with an annually rotated mayor. And that is what existed prior to I think it was 2019 when the new model was adopted. Or do we go with the 4 districts, which is similar to the current model, with an elected mayor, similar to the current model, with a 2-year term versus a 4-year term? So we want to get feedback from this commission, just good discussion so that we can give thoughtful input to the council when they're making their decision. I wanted to point out some terminology. You'll notice that I'm using the term elective mayor. That is also interchangeable with directly elected mayor, citywide mayor, separately elected mayor. The California statute uses the term elective mayor, which is why in this presentation I'll be using elective mayor. That's probably not the most common term that's used. So you'll hear often directly elected mayor, citywide mayor. You'll also hear at-large mayor. We try to avoid using that term because we do not want it to be confused with the at-large election system that the city transitioned from. So it's preferable to use the terms provided here. Elected mayor is what we'll be using today. State law allows the transition from a rotating mayor to an elected mayor by ordinance. Typically, it would need to go to a vote of the people, but it can only be done by ordinance under a certain condition, and that being if it's in furtherance of the purposes of the California Voting Rights Act. So certainly the council would be looking to see if it makes sense to switch models, to switch back to a five council member district map, and if it does in fact further the purpose of the California Voting Rights Act. The purpose of the California Voting Rights Act is it was drafted to address ongoing vote dilution and discrimination in voting matters as matters of statewide concern, in order to enforce the fundamental rights guaranteed in the California Constitution. This is a slide that the committee has seen before, and it's a reminder for those who are just new to the process or just getting on board with the process that there are several laws that we must follow when we're drawing the boundaries. The first is the federal laws that we must have equal population. And as the chair mentioned last time when the maps were drawn, we had to use the census population, and we have to use the census population this time. Last time, the 2010 was the only census data available. And of course, this round we'll have the 2020 census data. That census data, many of you have heard, the raw data was released on August 12th. However, it was in the raw legacy format, which is basically a format that requires the state to assemble the data into a usable database. Once the state has assembled that data, then the state needs to go through and zero out all the state prisons and reassign those prisoners to their home locations. They are thinking that'll take till it will be about the end of September until that official database will be released. And that's the database that we must use when we are considering equal population for each of the districts. We also must be mindful of the Federal Voting Rights Act. There can be the districts cannot be drawn in a manner that would dilute the voting strength of our protected class citizens. I have a slide coming up next that's going to be talking about what the protected class groups are. And there can be no racial gerrymandering, meaning we cannot draw lines for solely based on race. It can be a consideration, but not the predominant or sole consideration when drawing boundaries. Instead, we want to look at things like history, shared social networks, things like language spoken at home, those type of things what we want to look at in addition to just race. The second column is the Fair Maps Act. The Fair Maps Act requires that we follow these prioritized criteria when we're drawing the maps. Each of the districts must be geographically contiguous, one single boundary for single district, undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest. So socioeconomic geographic areas that should be kept together for purposes of their fair and effective representation. We need to be mindful of that. Easily identifiable boundaries. Often those are streets, perhaps railways, waterways, anything that you're able to easily describe the boundaries of the district. And then compactness doesn't necessarily mean the size or shape, but it does mean that you do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group of people. And we can't favor or discriminate against a political party when we are drawing boundaries. We can also, after we've met the federal and the state laws, look at other traditional principles, such as minimizing those voters that are shifted from a 2022 election to a 2024 election, and therefore making it a longer period of time since they'll be able to vote. We can also respect voters' choices and continuity of office If we've met all the previous criteria, that's and all things being equal, if we're able to draw a line to avoid pairing incumbents, then we can present that option. We can just slightly, we don't have to have exact equal population in all of the districts, but they do need to be within a 10% deviation. So if we know that the area has future population growth, it's possible to slightly underpopulate a district to accommodate for that growth, but we are limited. So we still need to stay under that 10% total overall deviation between the smallest and the largest districts. And then preserving the core of the existing districts is another consideration. The demographic summary, if NDC, knowing that we're not going to have the official census data until late September, is providing 2020 total population estimates. We believe that the total population estimates going to show the city's population at 12,730. Because Half Moon Bay is such a small jurisdiction, just know that any change in these numbers could definitely change the percentage of deviation from the ideal population. So the ideal population for 4 districts is 3,183. So you can imagine just adding a couple or a dozen to one district will definitely change the percentage. Right now, if we were to adopt the districts and if those 2020 estimates hold true, we would be out of population balance by more than 10%. In fact, it would be closer to 35%. But again, because the numbers are so small, we'll likely see big changes in this percent of deviation once we get the official numbers. We're showing you the total population by ethnicity and race. However, this number is not typically used when you're evaluating the effectiveness of not diluting a protected class group, but sometimes it is useful. Sometimes you'll see folks refer to this particular category when they're seeing if a particular district has a total majority minority presence for total population. But more so when folks are looking at the effectiveness of a district in boosting the voting power of a protected class group, they'll look at the citizen voting age population. And so that's the category that you'll see that is linked to the tools. The citizen voting age population are US residents who are 18 years of age and older. So we've given you the numbers for both the 4-district model, and that would be roughly 3,183 people per district, or for a 5-district model, it would be 2,546. So we're talking what are protected class groups. So protected class groups are defined broadly as a class of voters who are members of a race, a color, or a language minority group who have had a history of being disenfranchised from the voting process. And what probably the most applicable for Half Moon Bay is the language minorities, specifically the Hispanic community. The language minorities are defined in federal law to mean persons of American Indian, Asian American, Alaska Natives, or Spanish heritage. So if that helps you to understand what protected class are. Lots of folks get confused because you'll often see, and I'm going to just jump back to here, you'll see that let's look at the bottom, the citizen voting age population. It'll say NH white, NH black. That's non-Hispanic white and non-Hispanic black. So when you're filling out the census, because Hispanic is an ethnicity, not a race, it's possible to be Hispanic and black. It's possibly to be Hispanic and any other race. So that's, if you've marked Hispanic, Hispanic prevails, and you will be placed in the Hispanic category. I also wanted to touch quickly on census geographical units. We talked a little bit about this, but I know it's a little bit difficult to understand. Jessica will be making sure you each have this PowerPoint because it's a lot of words here that you really don't need to read every one of them now, but I just want to help you understand the hierarchy of the geographical units. So at the bottom, we'll start with the bottom, the census blocks, that's the smallest geographical unit where we have population counts for, and that's what we use for all of our map drawing. Block groups are groups of census blocks. And they usually cover between 600 and 3,000 people. I know that's a wide range. And block groups actually, there's not a lot of sense to how block groups are drawn. So block groups often will cross freeways or they'll cross railroads. They just are just grouping blocks together without a whole lot of thought into it. But so that's just good to know, and I'll let you know why that's important later. And then we have census tracts, which are larger. Each census tract has at least one block group in it, but it typically covers between 12,000 and 8,000 people. Initially, when census tracts were drawn, that was the idea was to truly capture a neighborhood. So census tracts actually do a better job at following boundaries and following natural borders, but again, they aren't modified often, so sometimes it doesn't make sense. And census tracts are so large, especially for the city of Half Moon Bay, it's difficult to use those in mapping. The reason why I'm showing you this is because in some of our mapping tools, most of our mapping tools will be at the block level. So I'm showing you a snippet from one of the mapping tools, which is the interactive review map. And at the very top snapshot, I'm showing just the census block outlines, and those numbers that you see printed in those census blocks are the actual population counts for each of the census blocks. When we go into the interactive review map, I would be able to activate a different map that'll show you the street names, but it was just too busy to show you street names and try to be able for you to actually see these population counts. But we can activate various layers that would show you the existing districts and also the street names. You know what you're looking at. But for purposes of what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that that is typically what census blocks look like. So you can see they're not exactly square. Some of them have very odd shapes. And so just be mindful of that when you are drawing a district. If you touch one of those census blocks, it's going to draw the entire census block, because with very few, very special cases can you split a census block. It's best just to think you cannot split census blocks. Down below are what we call population units. And these are, as you will recall, you didn't see this unit of geography from the census in the previous slide. What population units are is they are created by NDC for purposes of the paper map kits. Population units, what we've done is we've bunched together census blocks and totaled the population for those census blocks. The reason why we do that is because, for a couple of reasons, is one, certain census blocks have to be together because otherwise you would create a non-contiguous block in certain cases. And also it would be very difficult to see a paper map where you're getting to these very fine, small census block counts. And so we group them into population units. So if you're looking online and searching for population units, you're not going to find this geography. It's created by NDC. Having said that, if you're using one of the paper maps and you don't like how we've bunched together and created a population unit, you can go ahead and draw your map using, you can highlight the census blocks and use the census block streets that crosses through one of our population units. If you prefer not to use the population units that we've created. So again, just to make it clear, the population units are only for purposes of paper maps. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Oops, sorry. again, when we're looking at the model, looking at going from 4 districts to 5 districts, when we're creating the maps, because this committee will be creating a 4 district map and a 5 district map, we need to be mindful of where our protected class concentrated areas are. And the only protected class group that has demographic significance is your Latino community. So we presented a color-coded map here that shows you where the geographical concentrated areas of where your citizen voting age population for your Latino community reside, and you'll see them mostly in districts 2 and 3. A couple of the mapping tools will allow you to activate this underlay, this layer, so you can see the color coded as you actually draw the map using the tools. And through Caliper's Caliper Maptitude Online, once it's available, you would also be able to activate other demographic maps that show the concentrated areas. On the left, you're seeing households with at least 1 child at home, and on the right, households that rent their homes. Do you want to point out that once all the maps are submitted, they're professionally produced by NDC, so every map will be presented in a form similar to what you're seeing on the right. It will be numbered so that the commission can evaluate the maps and ultimately select the preferred maps to present to the council. Each of those maps will come with a demographic summary that's been prepared by NDC. You can see this is a demographic summary for the 4 district plan. If it was a 5 district plan, it would have 5 columns instead of the 4 districts, giving the demographic total population count, the citizen voting age population proportions. It also will include voter registration, voter turnout, and then some socioeconomic information such as age, immigration status, language spoken at home, language fluency, education levels, children at home, and household incomes and housing status. If you haven't had a chance to visit the website lately, in addition to the paper maps that are available, now District R is available. When I last checked, it just showed the 4 district model, but you can use that same tool to make the 5 districts. It's just your last district would be left uncolored. And it would show, you want to keep in mind that the ideal population for 5 districts is 2,546. District R is seeing if they can put in an option for either or, but right now we have the 4 district option. So again, tonight's discussion is a discussion of the model options. We want to discuss the merits, the pros, the cons of 4 districts and an elected mayor with 4-year term, which is the current model, 4 districts and elected mayor with a 2-year term, or 5 districts and a rotating mayor. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And that concludes the presentation, unless you'd like me to demonstrate any of the tools.
Thank you, Shalice. I actually have a question about the current model. Have we just not put that into action? Because I know we don't have an elective mayor. Like maybe that's we've never done an at-large mayor before. We've done rotating so far. So is that something that was just decided but hasn't gone into play yet? Is that what you said?
So in 2018, when we adopted when we transitioned to districts, the election sequencing was that districts 2 and 3 would be elected in the 2020 election, and then districts 1 and 4, as well as the 4-year elected mayor, would be elected in the November 22 election. And so we had to set up that election sequencing, but now with doing the redistricting, the new map will determine what happens in the 2022 election and basically replace what we adopted in 2018.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Hal, go ahead.
I had some communication with just one city council member, who I asked some process questions of, and she basically told me that from the council's point of view, as she understood it, we have a technical task of identifying legal maps and making recommendations with respect to what the city council has requested, but that we also have, a freedom to explore and make suggestions about, other kinds of things. And I wanted to ask a question with respect to the idea of, if one option is to have a citywide elected mayor who serves a 2-year term, and that position is up every 2 years, is it equally plausible, from a technical point of view, to suggest that every district hold its election every 2 years so that no voters are put in a position of these shifting, wait 6 years because you were at a boundary or things like that. And, I don't know if it's a plus or a minus to consider such a thing, but, is it even permissible? And if it's not permissible, then, is it a little weird to say, have a 2-year mayor rather than, we should recommend a 4-year mayor if it doesn't make sense to have a 2-year term for anyone. So those are a couple of questions.
I believe council members have to be elected to 4-year terms per government code. Shalise, is that correct?
That was going to be my answer, but that would be something that definitely we want to check with legal counsel. I think a charter city could do a charter amendment to change that, but I believe 4-year terms is spelled out in the government code.
Yeah,
So
given that we're a general law city. However, for the way how to answer one of your other questions is, so a 2-year mayor would give every voter in Half Moon Bay a chance to elect someone on the city council every election. So one election, you would only vote for the 2-year mayor. The next election, you would vote for your district's council member as well as the 2-year mayor. So you wouldn't wait 6 years. It would just be, every alternate election, you'd elect 2 members of the council or only the elected mayor, because they're staggered terms.
I don't, but you said that the state law is the way we're organized is that we have to have council terms that are 4 years long, and isn't the mayor a member of the council?
Elected mayors can have 2-year terms.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think Phil's up next, and then Steve, and then Michael.
Yeah, can we talk for a few minutes about protected classes and communities of interest? Shalise, I think I heard you say that we were to think especially about the Latino community in Half Moon Bay. Is that a protected class or a community of interest? How should we think about the Latino community?
Yes, it's a language minority protected class. And that is the protected class that has the highest concentration in Half Moon Bay.
Okay, so we should definitely think of them as a protected class. Are there other protected classes in Half Moon Bay? You mentioned the language minorities, but is that all?
Yes, there are, but they aren't in high enough concentration to even be depicted on the map. But I can switch back to that screen to show you the percentages. That's helpful.
Yeah, that would be great, because I'd quite like to look at the gold slide again with you, if that's all right.
Okay. So this category, the citizen voting age population at the bottom here, percent Hispanic / Latino, those terms are interchangeable as far as the census is concerned. Okay. It's self-reported, and the line item says, "Are you Hispanic or Latino?" So when you see Hispanic, it's interchangeable with Latino. And then you're not Hispanic Black but you can see it's very low percentage overall for citizen voting age population. It's just 1% of the population, and Asian Pacific Islander is only 8% of the citizen voting age population for the entire city.
Okay, good. So Latino/Hispanic we should think of as a protected class.
Yes.
And the only protected class that we have to worry about.
Right, because the others are not demographically significant in size to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I understand correctly, then there could be other communities of interest that we might learn about by talking with the residents of Half Moon Bay.
Absolutely, and oftentimes they could be groups that share same culture. You could have a Russian community that's strong in the city. You could have, and those are definitely things to consider when you're considering keeping communities together.
Okay, and do they have to cross a particular threshold in fraction of population as well?
They are not considered a protected class for purposes of the Voting Rights Act. So if you're if you were looking to prevent a challenge based on the Federal Voting Rights Act, then if you're just looking at the example of the Russian community that was not kept in a district, then that would not be a concern as far as a violation for the Federal Voting Rights Act.
But you also mentioned other kinds of communities of interest as well, right? Families with children, I think, was one of them.
Families with children, or sometimes renters versus homeowners, all different categories. Anything that where a geographically concentrated area shares common interests. They could be folks that just have the same concerns. So say that this area has a particular concern about public safety, or a particular area has concern about environmental concerns.
Okay, good. Okay, and now I think I'm clear on the difference between the protected class, the Latino community, and communities of interest, which could be other types of communities. So can we now look at the goal slide? And
Phil, if I could jump in real quick, I wanted to provide you with an example. So during 2018, when we went through this process, the HOA from Ocean Colony sent a letter to the city council saying we consider ourselves a community of interest and would prefer to not be split. And so that's an example of, it's not a protected class, but it's a community of interest. And so you're able to then take all of that information from the public and consider it when you are drawing the districts.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's a great example. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so did you mind if we go with the goal slide? And because you mentioned communities of interest and protected classes when talking about the goals for redistricting.
Oh,
and I think
okay.
you also mentioned them again when talking about how to choose models. And so I want to be clear about how I should think about protected classes and how I should think about communities of interest when looking at these criteria.
Okay. So you're talking about the middle column here.
Well, where does the protected class fit in here?
They would be considered a community of interest.
And nothing else, like in the red box on the left-hand side that we.
Oh, on the left-hand side, you cannot draw districts that would dilute the voting strength of your protected class group. So under the Federal Voting Rights Act, most common way that could happen is that they call it cracking or packing. So if you have a particularly geographically concentrated area of a protected class, you cannot crack them, meaning you can't split them into several districts so that it basically dilutes their voting strength. On the other hand, you cannot pack every single one of your protected class groups into one district so that they only have power in one district and virtually no say in any other district. That would be packing. So that's commonly what they're looking for when they're talking about if the lines have drawn to violate the Federal Voting Rights Act as far as deleting the power of your protected class groups.
Okay, so we have to somehow find that balance between packing and cracking the Latino community.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then, I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but can you remind us when talking about the model, that was the main thing tonight, wasn't it? How are we supposed to think about protected classes versus communities of interest when choosing the model?
Yes, and actually that will become more apparent when you're selecting the maps, when you're selecting the 5 district map and the 4 district maps. So you'll be looking at, likely be looking at these type of maps or hearing from public testimony of where your protected class citizens are. So when you're drawing a 5, this happens to be the existing 4 district map. And when you're looking at a 5 district map, you want to make sure you don't, as we say, dilute by cracking your concentrated areas. And then you also wouldn't want to draw a map to just solely think about race, because that's also a violation of the law. So you couldn't draw a map just to encompass all of the light green and the pink areas, and that was your only reason for drawing that district. If it made sense because those neighborhoods are together and they're in a concentrated area, then you could do that. We don't have high enough percentages where we're going to be overpacking any single district.
Okay, I think Steve is up next.
Thank you very much. Couple questions that I have just generally about the process. One is, we haven't heard anything about potential budget implications for the city in terms of costs for these particular models. Are we going to have anything from staff saying that, on this screen, discuss for model options, that a change from our current situation to A or B would cost this much, and on an ongoing basis, et cetera? Do we have any sense of that?
Yeah, good question, Steve. So we consolidate with the county for our elections, and there's a basic minimum charge that all cities get charged. There's also a new state law that requires that cities do consolidate with state elections. And so pretty much every city in San Mateo County holds elections when we do. And so there's a general minimum charge that the cities get charged. And then it's basically per page. And so the additional expense to the city would be minimal, basically a few extra pages for candidate statements every election versus every other election if we do a 2-year mayor. But as it stands,
there would also be potentially legal costs involved in redrafting things if we made a change from the current system, assuming, or is that just sort of disappear in the noise?
Yeah, it's when we adopt the new map, that then gets sent to the shapefile, which is, a technical data term, gets sent to the county. They input it. That's that. All the cities that are on district models are doing it. And so it's very minimal cost. But as far as the model, neither of the 3 models would cause any major budget implications. It would be very, very minor.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Another question that I have is, I heard a passing comment about how our recommendations and the sort of the conclusion that this committee comes up with respect to what we recommend, is that then subject to approval by the city council and or the electorate? Or are we going to basically decide on the system, and that's going to be what goes forward?
So this group is an advisory committee. So the city council is the ultimate decision-making body, and by way of adopting an ordinance that adopts the final map. And so the first city council public hearing, I believe, is sometime in January. And that is where the committee would first send its recommended 2 maps. The council will review them, provide any input. They will then come back to the committee for finalization, any additional public hearings, and then they would be on the council agenda for adoption and approval. They do not go to the electorate. The city council is the ultimate decision.
Okay, so even if we made a change in terms of the way that the mayor rotated or didn't rotate in elections and so on, none of that is subject to a vote by the people of Half Moon Bay?
No.
Okay.
No, it would
All right.
be, this committee would recommend that to the city council, and then the city council would make the ultimate decision as to which of the two maps it adopts.
Okay, and then just,
they're looking for, the committee and the public's input to make sure that, the maps accurately reflect this community and the wants of the voters of this community, so.
okay, and the what's my other question? So it seems as though there's two basic decisions that need to be made. One is the number of districts, and the other is how the mayor is, how the mayor is either elected or not elected, as it were. Are those, are we expected to sort of throw those over the wall to the city council and have the city council make that final decision? Or, what's their expectation about what we are going to come to them with?
Yeah, so they want to see the two maps, one with 5 districts and one with 4 districts. And then they want the data behind the committee's thoughts and the public's thoughts as to which is preferred. And if it's the 4 district, is a 2 or 4 year mayor term preferred. And so we'll compile all of that information and present it with the 2 maps when it goes to the council.
Well, it just seems to me from a personal standpoint that what we're talking about here is one very sort of statistical demographic decision and one very political decision. And the 2 of those have almost nothing to do with one another with respect to, making sure that the districts are drawn fairly and accurately to reflect the population and protected classes and communities of interest and so on. But then the decision about how the city governs itself mayorally seems to be an almost unrelated question. And I would hate to see that just simply be treated as a side effect of the number of districts. You see what I'm saying? We've been talking a lot, and NDC has a lot of data to support the different districting options, but the mayoral option is something we haven't really been, instructed as to how that would be decided. So I guess I'd like to hear from you and from NDC about how we should think about that and whether or not we should just treat that as a side effect of the number of districts.
So, and again, it being the council's ultimate decision, that does come down to more of a policy decision, as you mentioned, and that's why they want to see both maps. So that way, when they eventually make that final decision on which model to use, that they have the map that goes with that model. But at the same time, they recognize that they are 5 members of this community, right? And so they may think one way, but let's say, all of the public input that we get says, no, we prefer to have 5 districts and not elect a mayor. Or alternatively, we prefer 4 districts and we would like to elect a mayor. They want to have that input so that they can make an informed decision at the end.
Okay, so I just to complete that, I have a note here saying for my own purposes that I have a strong bias towards the idea of flattening the bureaucracy and simplifying the process to the point where, we have 5 districts and we have 5 elected representatives. And given the size of the city, it seems silly that we would have a completely separate process to elect a mayor when the mayoral responsibilities are, it's not like we have millions of people in this city, we have 12,000. And so what I would like to see is that, again, the political decision about governing from the standpoint of the mayoral position, I don't think is unrelated to this process, but it feels somehow like we're going to just sort of throw that over the wall and the city council will decide what they decide based on their political motivations. And I'm not saying I would know which way they would go. I don't know how we would essentially codify what we believe in that respect, along with sort of the parallel but really not overlapping process of deciding the number of districts. And it's more of a rhetorical question. I don't really want to get us so sidetracked, but it is part of our charter, so I don't want to ignore it.
Michael's been patiently waiting, but I have a direct response to Steve. Michael, would you mind if I respond first, or would you like to? Okay, thank you. Steve, I hear what you're saying here, that we're entering a political process with the mayoral decision, and we're also doing this more data-driven redistricting. Seeing myself on this committee, I feel like I have my own personal biases and thoughts already, but I feel like I am a conduit and a voice of the public in this process. We all are voices of the public. And so I see my job as reaching out as much as possible during this process and getting input and seeing what constituents, what neighbors, what members of the city council are thinking about this, and just getting as much input as possible for us so that when we're making these recommendations, which have some pretty big ramifications, as you say, that we feel like we haven't just put our own personal opinions in, but have been really got as much input from the public as possible, which is difficult, right? That's the hard part here. And so I feel like we are the ambassadors, and we need to, see ourselves as that and feel empowered to do so.
And if I could add again, Steve, the input that you just provided is exactly what the council is looking for from both this committee and the public. And we are going to be sending out basically like comment cards via mail that list the 3 options, and check one and send it back, because as you see, it's hard to get people on these meetings as well. And so that information, once we get it, will be first presented to you all as the committee, and then you're able to use that information when you formalize your recommendation to the council.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael has been patiently waiting.
Oh, thank you. Steve, your comment was an introduction to one of my first questions as well. And it was, if you could put the slide up that said discussion of model options, if that slide could be placed back up, please. So my question is, if we go the community and all the representation, and ultimately we ended up with a 5-district with a rotating mayor. And once again, I think staff has already indicated that the term of the supervisors or the city council is 4 years. So that means the mayor, if we went with a model like this, the mayor too would have 4 years. Or is the mayor 2 years and then we're going to have an election? I think I heard some discussion about that, but I want to make sure I'm tracking.
Michael, are you asking about the 5 districts?
Yes.
Okay, so that would essentially be a continuation of what we have now. And so prior to transitioning to districts, the city elected 5 council members. And what happens is every year in December, we have what's called a reorganization meeting. And the council then elects a mayor and vice mayor from its own body that then serves for the next year. So like this year, Robert Brownstone is our mayor, Debbie Reddick is our vice mayor. Presumably when we get to December and they reorganize for next year, Debbie Reddick would be the mayor and someone else would be the vice mayor. And so that's how it would work with 5 districts. They would rotate annually amongst themselves. And so there would be.
And the whole idea is the rotation. Oh,
sorry, say again.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I missed your comment, but there would not be any election for mayor. There would be 2 districts getting elected, 1 election, and then the next election would be 3 districts getting elected.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. My other question is, when we talked about protected class, and we look at the Latinx community, and that percentage was 16%. What is the demographically significant number a group has to reach in order to be considered of high priority in this process. The Latino percentage was 16, the Asian percentage was 8. So what would the Asian population have to get to be considered of concern as a protected class within our processes?
Sorry about that. There's actually not a number that's a cutoff, but I can tell you when proponents are looking at maps and looking to create a district that has boosted the power of a certain protected class, they're trying to achieve close to 50%. You can see that just given the demographics of Half Moon Bay, that's not possible for any of the categories, the Latinx or any of the categories. So, but we know that 16% Hispanic is significant if you follow the Santa Monica case. So that is one that is a case that's still being decided, and that's their percentage of Hispanic, I believe, is 16. So it's hard. That's a difficult question to answer. I can tell you just those small percentages that you're seeing there, in addition to the percentages, they'd have to be in a concentrated area for us to even demonstrate on a map where these particular groups lie. So it's not just the percentages, it's also if they're spread out throughout the city, then it's very difficult for us to even demonstrate where these protected class communities are. I'm sorry, that's not a more cut and dried answer.
Okay, thank you. And your last response is triggering my last question. And can you pull up the map, the Latino CV AP map? If you could pull that up, please.
Is this the map you're referring to? Okay.
So, yes, this is the one I'm referring to. So when I look at this map, where are the major cross streets? For example, between 2 and 3, what is that cross street?
If you'll indulge me, let me bring up the interactive map viewer that will show that for you. When you go to the, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. When you go to the draw a map, there are several tools that are available, and one of those is that interactive map viewer, and this is where you can zone in on what the streets are. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, I have highlighted the current districts, and then that line you were asking what that street is, I'm going to just zoom in. And you can see that is Kelly Avenue that divides that creates that boundary.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. That helps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I believe Paul was next in the queue.
Yeah, thank you. Could you go back again to that protected, projected populations and the you'll get your estimates of the, that one, yeah. So I find the voting age piece of this table interesting, but not particularly helpful, speaking for myself, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that when we're talking about protected classes, we need to be talking about the total population a particular class, not the voting age population. Is that correct? And then what really is, because the voting age population is going to, well, both of them are going to change over the duration of the 10 years that the new districts are in place.
You're right.
So should it really be the total population that we should consider and take the voting age population as interesting, but not really driving any major thoughts that we have?
Actually, the citizen voting age population is the prominent one that is used by the court systems. And this will be the prominent one that the groups such as the NAACP, MALDA, LULAC, all of those civic groups will be looking at the citizen voting age population, because these are the people who are going to be able to run for office. These are the people who are going to
Right.
vote for those who are running for office. So,
Right.
and the goal is to get representation on the council. So they'll look at this category, but you're right. It's only, eventually you'll have people who will become citizens who will move in this category, and people who will turn 18 and move into this category.
Yeah.
So it changes. It will change over the 10 years. But so this is, as you point out, a snapshot in time that will change. But this is the one that's used in court. You rarely see the total population used.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess what jumped out at me when you were answering Michael's question was that in the voting age population, the percentage parity is 16, but in the total population is twice that, 31%, which makes it even more of a protected community that we should be considering. Okay, but you're saying that we really need to focus on the voting age population, and that's where we might get more scrutiny from. Will get more scrutiny from other bodies.
That's usually the one. You're right. That's the one that will be looked at. But I can say that folks will look also at the total population. That is a factor. It doesn't have as much bearing on the voting power of your protected class, but it is an indicator. And if you have a higher percentage in a certain district, that shows that district definitely had a certain community in mind. And so that percentage is bolstered in that particular district.
Then I was thinking a bit further in terms of the 5 districts over the 4 districts. So if you look at the voting age population of 9,000, whatever it is in the actual census, then if we created 5 districts, we would, in theory, have less than 2,000 voters per district. As opposed to if we had the 4 district model, I couldn't do the calculation in my head. It's more like probably close to 3,000. Is there some guidance again or precedent on how big that voting age population should be per district?
It's all relevant. So that doesn't. And that's another thing that you will find. It gets, and I know the demographic summary on this is small. I can bring up another. Let me bring up another. I have a larger version of this. This is the same thing from that slide that is showing our estimated population, the first few columns here. But what gets interesting is voter registration. And 4 districts, you see, there'll be large swing in numbers from the amount of registered voters per district. So the lowest one is 1,614, and then the highest one will have 2,414. And that's just that happens in every jurisdiction. So someone will be elected by maybe 1,000 voters, and someone will be elected by 2,000 voters.
Yeah, that's kind of where my thinking was going to, Shalise. Yeah.
But yeah, there's no concern about making those equitable.
Is there a place where this data is available for us to look at?
I will put it on the website. So what
Thank you.
I'll put this these current districts. I just want to caution, and you all know this is estimated total population. It's not the final, it's going to change. But if it's of interest to you, I'll put it on the website. I'll put it under the draw map page at the bottom under other resources.
Thank you.
Shalise, just one moment here. Under District 3, I'm curious how the voter registration for District 3 can be almost 100 people more than the citizen voting age population in that district. What explains that discrepancy? And how are there more people registered than are actually eligible to vote? Or am I, or is there something about this that I'm?
No, yeah, that happens. That happens sometimes because we're missing categories.
Actually, is that the, some numbers are from 2010 and the voter registration is current? And maybe population is increased?
The citizen voting age population is an estimate, and it's created by the American Census Bureau, and they're typically under on their estimates. So that's one reason. There's also rounding errors that often occur. So this citizen voting age population is an estimate spanning the years 2015 to 2019, and this voter registration is actual.
So would that imply then, I guess what you're saying is citizen voting age population is not necessarily a hard factual number. That's a roll up of a lot of different categories.
That's absolutely correct. And but it's the best information that we have, and it's the one that the courts will use. It's the special tabulation created by the Federal Census Bureau based on the American Community Survey.
Okay, Steve, you had your hand up. Did you have another question, or was that what you were addressing?
No, I had a couple of other questions. One of them was already answered, which is the citizen voting age population with respect to voter registration numbers, which what I'm seeing implies that those, like we just discussed, so that's irrelevant. But the other one is that if the 5-district model, if we have mayors rotating in on a 1-year service and then rotating out, with 5 districts on a 4-year term, that implies that at least one of the city council people will not be able to serve as mayor during their 4-year term. And so I'm wondering whether, and granted, the 4-year terms are going to overlap because they're staggered over 2-year elections. So we're not electing 5 city council people in the same election. We're going 2-3, 2-3, et cetera. But still, that could, if I'm not mistaken, that could introduce some interesting political realities that may or may not be something that has to be considered if that model is going to be adopted.
Yeah, that's the city's been dealing with that since they've had the rotating mayor in existence, and every jurisdiction that has a rotating mayor deals with that very thing. Is that you have 5 members and they're 4-year terms, so some don't get it in their first term, and they hope they get reelected so they get a chance to serve as mayor.
And I guess again, with respect to the being as forthright and as well informed as possible in this process, and I'm sorry to belabor this, but I think this is an important part of this committee's agenda. Do we have sort of a job description of mayor versus city council person, and what does the mayor, what constitutes the responsibilities of the mayor that supersede their responsibilities as a city council person? And do they, are they essentially doing 2 jobs at once? What additional powers do they have? Like Marin is our chair of this committee, and we're very clear on what her responsibilities are. We're grateful for her service. Do we have something that we could refer to that would inform us as to what it is we're talking about with the mayor's responsibilities?
If I could,
I'm actually going to call on our city manager, Bob Nesbitt, here to give you some information on that, as he has the most interaction with our mayor and council.
But you know the differences pretty well too, Jessica. So you can probably cite them, and we also have the document that you can probably share with the group, the council rules for and decorum. That might be helpful as well. But yeah, thanks for having me. Sorry I was late. Yeah, there's a sense, there's no difference in terms of their authority and when it comes to vote and so forth and so on. But they do have a little bit of extra work to do, and they run the meetings, as you guys all know, just like Marin now has a little extra work to do by running the meetings. They also will be the face of the city if the media calls, or they need to be at a meeting, a regional meeting with other city partners, other organizations, where they have to convey the city's opinion on behalf of the rest. Those are the two main ones. Jessica, if there's other tasks or assignments that they have, but those are the two main ones. They run the council meetings, and they are the face of the city representing the council. If one person needs to represent the council. And on that representation, even though they're the mayor, they need to be clear they are representing the entire council. So if there's differing opinions among council members are free to represent their opinion to the press and to the public. They just need to make it clear that that's their opinion, and it doesn't necessarily represent a majority of the whole group. Where if the mayor is speaking, they know that it's been voted on, or they have been given guidance by the entire council that they're speaking on behalf. Those are the two main differences. I probably missed one. I think there's a third one, Jessica. What else does the mayor do? It's pretty subtle.
Yeah, that's it generally. I think the best way to summarize it is they're the face of the city council. So if we send out a news release from the city, there's a quote from the mayor. If we send out letters on behalf of the city council or letters to our state legislators, they're signed by the mayor. And so with the 5 at-large council member, 5 district model, it is somewhat of a ceremonial position. There would be differences if it were an elected mayor to an extent, but not by much. And so under the current model, it is more of a ceremonial, but primarily they run the meetings and they serve as the face of the city council. And they get to vote last.
And they get to ride in a cool car in the parade. Phil, I think you've been up for a minute.
And voting last, let's have it
people in a row.
sometime.
So I just want to clarify, I just want to be cognizant of the time, and that it looks like we have 3 members of the public who are here tonight. And so just let's be aware of the fact that they're also waiting to get in on the public comment period. But Phil, go ahead.
Okay, so just a quick clarification. Are we charged with making a recommendation on the district model? Are we allowed to make a recommendation on the district model?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes to both of those.
Yes, they would like to see the 2 maps,
mm-hmm.
And then they would also like the committee's recommendation.
Okay, good. So it's good that we're asking these questions about the role of the mayor. So to follow up on the job description one, to what extent does the mayor set the agenda for council meetings? I mean, this is a real power, right?
So, majority of the time, the agenda is set by our projects. What is coming complete, what needs council action, etc. However, the city manager does meet with each of the council members prior to each council meeting to answer any questions, etc. And in the meeting with the mayor, sometimes the agenda may be modified. So there is some role in setting the agenda, but it's more of a joint effort, and mostly has to do with outside of policy issues that the council may ask be brought forward. A lot of it has to do with how projects are progressing.
Mm-hmm. And would this agenda setting power be any different from an elective mayor compared to a rotating mayor?
I'm not certain. I have personally never worked in a city with an elected mayor, so I don't have that experience. Bob, do you have any input on that?
Sure. So in the current, well, in the situation that we are moving towards, unless it's changed by this redistricting process, we are moving towards the at-large mayor, but there was no proposal to change the rules of how the council and the mayor interact. So there was no proposal that with that 4-year term, the mayor would take on additional responsibilities beyond what was just described.
Okay. So I think when we're doing surveys of the public, asking them this question about, you know, elective mayor or not, I think we're going to have to summarize for them this job description in order to get good information back.
I would ask a couple of questions about this elected mayor thing too. I don't know if there's an opportunity to go around a little bit more. Marin.
I think we just need to watch our time a little bit and make sure we get to the public comments, but go ahead, Hal, if you have a question.
It seems to me that there's two different aspects to this elected mayor question. And one is whether you're kind of telling the council, you know, you can't pick who chairs your meetings, and the council, you know, it sounds like from what Bob just said, you know, can set the rules for what the mayor can do that's different or above and beyond any other member of the council. And right now it's you know, collegial, whereas it could become imposed by the electorate under an elected mayor system. But the other thing that I think is different from the questions that were the way it was being discussed so far is, you know, each person who's representing a district, you know, it's very easy to picture over time that after a while, you know, people are kind of saying, well, what are you bringing home to my district, rather than, you know, what are you doing to make the city work as well as possible? And certainly an at-large elected mayor would only have, you know, the citywide electorate interest, you know, from the point of view of the electorate making decisions to put that person in office. So I don't think we should perhaps, you know, not consider that aspect of it as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Hal. And I think Paul's up next.
I just kind of wanted to echo what Phil was saying, that I think I'm finding it really hard to understand what the difference is in terms of role between an elected mayor and one who's doing it on rotation from the previous one. So if I'm finding it difficult, and we've talked about this for 20 minutes or so, the public is going to find it really difficult. And that difference, if there is a difference, it needs to be spelled out very carefully by the city council. And if there isn't one, then they should be honest and say the roles are really the same, and then be prepared to answer the questions about, okay, in that case, then why do we need to change to an elected mayor? And so that's just, I would like some guidance really from the city council on what they think the difference is between the two. I appreciate Bob's input and Jessica's input, but I would like to seek to hear that. And I have another point. I just had a senior moment and I completely forgotten what it is, but I might come back.
And Paul, that's where we committee members can reach out to city council members. Just remember, one at a time, so that we're not violating any laws. But just, you know, you're welcome to get that input. And, you know, speaking from somebody who's been through that experience, you might be able to distinguish. We might be able to, as a committee, distinguish those things a little bit better.
Yeah. Yep. I kind of remember. I've just remembered my other point, which is actually echoing a little bit what Steve said a while ago. That having this as part of the remit of this committee adds politics into what was a statistical or is a statistical drawing exercise. And I was a little uncomfortable when I realized it was part of the remit when this committee first started. And I'm still feeling uncomfortable after having this discussion because they just seem to be, to me, very unrelated issues and questions, and we can all have opinions, but it becomes, to me, a bit of a politics game.
I think Bob was going to respond.
Thank you, Moran. I was just maybe going to give a little perspective on how I think the council went the way they went and now where they are today. I'm going to be really careful how I give this perspective. It's based on me, reading between the lines. Obviously, I talk to the council members on a regular basis, and I hear them say things, and I interpret what they say. And I actually was not quite here when the decision was made 3.5 years ago. I started after the decision was made, so I wasn't there. But I will just give my interpretation, be really careful that I'm not in any way putting words in any of their mouths. They can all speak for themselves. But my sense is, and Jessica, yeah, you please jump in too. Maybe you've already stated something like this. 3.5 years ago, it was all new. And they actually, my understanding is, didn't really want to go to districts. And again, I'm speaking generally. It was forced upon us, and they had to do it. And so in their navigating the process, just like you're now doing, they were trying to find a way to do what they had to do, which was go to districts, but still provide someone, the mayor, who would maybe have this larger perspective. To Hal's point, Hal makes a very good point, especially in larger jurisdictions, how it can get parochial and everyone just serves their own district. And so my understanding from talking to them, talking to staff, hearing how it went down, that was kind of their goal, was to retain a little bit of the old system, so that there was one person who transcended the 4 districts and had this larger perspective. And that was the feeling then. Fast forward 3.5 years. Again, I'm not saying that they've changed their minds. They have asked for you guys to weigh in on it. They've asked for 2 maps. They've asked the public to weigh in on it. But maybe there's a little bit of a reconsideration. We never even switched to that system, but 3.5 years later, maybe the thought is, well, it's not as big of a problem as we thought it was going to be. We now have 2 districts in place. Doesn't appear like that's happening, and maybe there are still advantages to having 5. So that's just some perspective on what caused them. I don't think they were looking at a strong mayor, or they wanted a mayor to have more power. It was just that idea that they didn't want to go to districts in the first place, so it was an attempt to retain a little bit of the old system. So that's the perspective that I've received over the last few years. And just one other comment I'll make: there's other cities have had their councils adopt resolutions that are called something like good governance resolutions. And I have a draft one that I've been sitting on. Jessica, we've been sitting on it for 2 years, and the timing has never felt right exactly, maybe, to have the council adopt it. But the idea behind it is that the council commits to certain things so that they don't go down the rabbit hole of becoming too district oriented. And just simple things, like if a constituent calls you from another district, you will still respond as if it was in your district. Things like that. And there's other cities that have done that. And it's something that the council commits to, so they don't lose that perspective. I mean, especially since we're such a small city, that they're all really governing the entire city, not just their districts, which can become problematic, as Hal noted. So just a little perspective there. Sorry that went on a little bit long, but yeah, I don't think there was ever thought that they were wanting to move to a mayor who had stronger, had more authority than the rest of them. I could be wrong there.
Yeah, and I was going to jump in and say basically the same thing. And so during that process, as Bob mentioned, they were resistant to moving to districts in the first place, given the small size of Half Moon Bay. But we didn't have much of a choice. We couldn't defend ourselves against the CVRA claim, so we transitioned. The thought process behind having the elected mayor was precisely that. They wanted at least one person on the council that had the entire city's interest in mind, because there was fear, would the district council members only look out for their district interests and would they push those agendas? So by having the elected mayor, their thought process was that's one person that can make sure that the council stays on track with representing the entire community. And to kind of touch a little bit, Paul, on your difference of elected versus rotated mayor. So when you think of like Sam Licardo in San Jose and Libby Schaff in Oakland, they are what are considered strong mayors. That's their full-time job. They're salaried. The difference here, it would not be a strong mayor. So it would essentially be the same as our current ceremonial mayor, except does the community want to choose one person that is the face of the city for the full term, or leave it up to just be rotated amongst the 5? But as far as the role of the mayor here, it would, for the majority's sake, be precisely the same.
Bob, did you have another comment on that? Okay, Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. I do not want to take any more of the public's time, but I am going to request that these two groups, whatever data points that are available, either through the census data or through data that the staff has, I would be very interested in information about renters and also about the homeless. You know, what districts they're in, you know, whatever demographics or whatever data points we have as far as those groups are concerned. That would be helpful, and I would like to have that next time we meet if possible.
Thanks, Michael. I agree with you. I'm also interested in that data broken down. If no one else has any questions or comments, I think we might be ready to move to public comment. Okay.
If we have any members of the public who would like to provide comment, please use the raise your hand feature. I'm not seeing any raised hands, Chair Holt.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Hold on, I have one.
Okay.
Jan Hansen, go ahead.
Hi, I've lived in Half Moon Bay about 6 years, and for the last 4 years, I've attended or mainly watched council meetings. I've been very pleased to see the rotating mayor system. It's been very interesting to see each year someone come in to the position and learn the ropes and kind of gain confidence. And I think that's been great. I don't see any reason to change that. On another topic, I was following this process in 2018, the redistricting, and I expressed some concerns about the senior community. And I pointed out that we have a concentration of seniors down in the very south end of Half Moon Bay and Kenyatta Cove, and then also a lot up around the Main Street area. Jonathan, you might remember this. And I got a nickname temporarily named Gerrymander Jan, which I didn't appreciate, but I thought, can we bring all the seniors together? And then somebody pointed out to me, that would only mean not only kind of a geographic split, but only one council member, quote unquote, representing seniors, and it might be best to have 2 council members representing seniors. So as it turned out, you know, that's the way it worked. And I guess my final comment is I've observed, again, over years of watching the council meetings, almost all the votes are unanimous after a lot of good consensus building. So I don't think we're going to have all this much disparate interest anyway. So in one way, I wonder, why are we all doing this? We're all very cooperative. So.
Thank you, Jan. I don't have any other hands raised.
Okay. Well, we appreciate input from the public. Thank you so much for your comment tonight, Jan. I want to thank the public for being here, the city staff for your time tonight, the translators, and the committee members for another great meeting. Our next meeting is August 26th, next week, and our agenda says public hearing number 1. And if I could just, before we adjourn, just clarification on what that looks like. What is that public hearing? There's 2 of them consecutively.
It will actually look very similar to the last not this presentation, which is a focus on the models, but it will be a very similar to the presentation you received last week. And it's a requirement of the law that we hold 4 public hearings, so we're numbering them so that we keep track that we're holding the 4 and ticking them off. So as I think I mentioned to this group, you will be tired of hearing me talk about the same thing over and over and over again. It doesn't get really much more interesting until we can start looking at maps.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying, Shalise. And again, thanks for a great presentation tonight. Steve, did you have a final question for Shalise?
Yes, with respect to the next 2 meetings being technically public hearings, and it's been nice to hear from some members of the public. What should we or should we not do in terms of sort of rounding up friends and neighbors in the city to recruit them to come in to share their thoughts at these meetings? Because I've held off doing that because there seem to be a lot of rules around what we can and can't say to people and so on. And I'm, personal friends with some of the city council people and things like that. And so what should we say to people? I mean, I know there's an email that goes out to all the people on the city's listserv, but what can we do or what can and can't we do to kind of encourage more participation in this?
Steve, you can absolutely reach out to your personal networks and inform and encourage people to attend. We want people at these meetings so that they are gaining the knowledge and they're able to provide input. So you are free to invite as many community members as you have in your personal network. The city council has been, advised not to attend these meetings, but anyone outside of that, please do let them know and encourage them to attend. And if they can attend, encourage them to submit their thoughts and comments to me by, via email, and I can share those with the committee as well.
And I think committee members can feel free to be creative as well. And, we can set up a table at Poplar Beach or in front of the grocery store. And you can do that outreach as well. The city's doing it, but we as committee members, I think, can also have a role in that and reaching out to people.
And then, even with the social media posts, when you see, the social media post announcing the meetings on the city's pages, share that to your own social media so that your network sees it that way as well.
Okay, thank you everybody tonight, and we'll see you again next week.